Hey, everybody. Ken Gouchi back at you again with the Veterans Angle podcast. In the attempt to try to create decent content and try to get myself pushed out there a little bit more, I have chosen to start talking to non-veterans and people, civilians and regular people, just to try to really kind of connect a little bit more and just kind of because not everything revolves around military life and veteran issues and stuff like that. And there's a lot of this stuff that intertwines with our everyday lives. So today, I don't know if y'all remember when you used to follow me back in the day, right? When I was, had my other podcast. I don't know if y'all remember how, like, sometimes I would bring on like very liberal people, or I'd just to literally try to see if I could create some sort of a, not really an argument, but really a good back and forth where everything was pretty thoroughly discussed. And I find a lot of these people on Twitter, Facebook. Sometimes I'll go to a True Social or something like that, and I'll personally antagonize people to try to get them riled up to try to see if they're actually brave enough to come on my podcast. Yesterday, I encountered several people on Twitter. The topic or the post was dealing with male circumcision. Now, as somebody who has been circumcised for my entire life, and as someone who grew up in a cultural background where my entire family believed in that tradition, right? Every male in my family that I know of ever has been circumcised. And so this new age argument about it's so bad and it gives PTSD to kids and things. Okay, I don't care about it. I don't follow to me it's a woke ideology. To me it's a little beta male ideology. And remember, I'm really trying to focus more on some of this masculinity stuff. So anyway, this gentleman was brave enough. I got to give him credit. This gentleman was brave enough to come on the podcast, right? I mean, this is not a big show. I've got all of, 23 followers right now, right? Obviously, after I got kicked off of YouTube with my last podcast, that really set me back and I had to restart everything all over again. But I still give the guy respect for coming on and saying what he said. I don't agree with what he said, but I will defend his right to say it with my life. With saying that, we kind of got into it a little bit towards the end. I mean, I really kind of got tired of listening to him. So I'll probably come back in and kind of maybe explain a couple of things after the video's done and over with. But go ahead and take a listen. This is going to be like an hour and 20 minutes long. So, hit the pause button and go get a snack or something if you start not being able to pay attention anymore. But this was really, it was not a bad conversation in the beginning. I just can't respect the guy. The whole thing culminated yesterday on Twitter when he started threatening people. He threatened me. He basically said that he's going to report me to CPS for having my son circumcised, right? My son is 13. So I think that statute of limitations is probably long gone by now. And I don't think that CPS would even be able to respond to a call like that since it's not against the fucking law. But I digress. This gentleman seems to think that it is harming men en masse, right? I fully admit that there's probably a few botched circumcisions out there, and it sucks. I truly feel sorry for any guy who has to experience that. This gentleman believes that circumcision should be illegal. He believes it should be banned. He believes that, I guess, it's some kind of Jewish conspiracy. Okay. Let's go ahead and get into this and watch and just, don't be afraid, man. I mean, I made the comment later on in this video that I don't care about my viewers and I don't care what y'all have to say. And in all honesty, I don't. I'm not doing this podcast for monetary reasons or fame or fortune, right? I'm doing this podcast as a hobby because I'm basically retired and bored. But nonetheless, I would appreciate y'all's input if you can do it in an informative way. let me know what y'all think in the comments. And if you don't like it, I mean, let me know. I will go ahead and add an ending to the end of this main video though. So let's go ahead and get it started. Today's conversation is about male circumcision. And I guess we'll kind of get into a little bit of kind of the history of it a little bit, and maybe talk a little bit about the some of the misperceptions and stuff. I'm sure that there is plenty of evidence to support both sides. So without further ado, and I am a little bit tired, folks. I did not sleep good. I've still got my some heart issues and some kidney stuff going on. So I apologize to everybody. I'm a little out of it. But this is a serious conversation, and I want everybody to really kind of, to me, it really doesn't matter either way it goes. To me, I don't care enough about this topic to really even have it as a debate. But since you decided to jump in yesterday, and since we had our words that we had, I figured I'd give you the chance to at least come and defend yourself.
Well, thank you.
I don't care about this topic, and this topic has nothing to do with veterans issues, but I still figured I'd give you the chance. So without further ado, if I could, I'll just kind of maybe go over a few things, and you can kind of tell me if it's factual or if it's not. So male circumcision is a Jewish tradition, right? It's believed that it was started by Abraham himself, right? About 5,000 to 5,500 years ago, whenever people calculate that Abraham existed. It was obviously a ritualistic thing biblically that, and here again, I'm not an avid Bible reader, right? So it was basically during Abraham's sacrifice, right? He was going to sacrifice his son, right? Is that right? And he basically, I guess God told him that it would be better for him to cut his son's dick off or something. I don't know. Right. So he chose that route instead of just killing his son. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't there actually Egyptian hieroglyphs that date circumcision back to about 7,000 years ago, long before Abraham even existed? Is that true or not?
Yeah, there's beliefs that that circumcision, or cutting part of the genitalia, not just males but females too, was happening well before the Judaism
Right.
covenant started, and it's different variations of it live in various parts of the world. I mean, you've got the Aboriginals in Australia that do things that are the most severe when it comes to cutting the penis.
Right. Well, and believe it or not, that's actually the one place in the world that I've never been to is Australia. I've been just about everywhere else, and I've seen, especially with a lot of my time spent in the Middle East, I've actually encountered a lot of the female genital mutilation, and obviously that's pretty grotesque. As far as male circumcision goes, I believe that there's, sure, I mean it's ritualistic, right? I mean I believe the pharaohs used to do it to their warriors as a mark of warriorhood, right? I mean there's all kinds of different things that have played into it. I think I think from a racial and cultural aspect, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Western society, I think about 30% of the total world population of men are circumcised. Is that correct? About 30%?
That's been the estimate. So if you figure there's 4 billion males in the world, that means that around 1.2 to 1.3 billion are cut in one way or another. Now there's several ways that were cut. Yeah.
Right. But so I mean, all the estimates out there are saying probably about 30%. So I'm pretty sure that those statistics are primarily in Western civilization, right? Obviously, Asia makes up 58% of the world's population, but Asians have never been big on circumcision.
The largest
Uh,
percentage from what I've heard is the Muslims.
well, right, it's big in the Arab and the Jewish, the Middle Eastern regions, but it's especially been adopted in white Western societies that are predominantly Christian.
It
Most of
started out around in the 1800s that it became an Anglosphere thing. Yeah.
right. Really, the only Christian groups out there that don't do it are really like the South American and the Central American Hispanic, that are more towards the Catholic type of religion. But
And the Catholics
like I said,
in Rome, Europe. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty popular in Europe. I mean, I spent 7 years in Germany, and I can tell you it's pretty popular there. I've got two daughters in Germany. One of them's a heart surgeon. So, obviously we kind of touched a little bit about World War II yesterday and all that kind of stuff. Um, there was obviously a pretty big thing against it prior to that, right? I mean, I'm not being facetious here, but obviously uh, there was a huge campaign in Nazi Germany to seek out and destroy any male who was circumcised, right? That was obviously the mark of a Jew.
Yep.
And so it was a pretty big thing where men were actually trying to uncircumcise themselves, right? If we've ever watched movies like Schindler's List, we know that the right, exactly. So um well, a lot of them weren't doing it naturally. A lot of them were actually trying to do it surgically. And so they mutilated themselves even more, and it got actually way out of control. And it's kind of funny considering that Hitler, his mother was an Austrian Jew, but that's a different topic for a different day. Bottom line is that it's been a cultural thing for many, many thousands of years, and you're right, it's been done differently from one region to the next and from one doctor to the next. It's not an exact science, and there's not an exact uh I guess protocol to do it. I mean, everyone, every hospital that I've been to, I only have one son, and so it was the only time that I've witnessed it live. But I can tell you that I've got a very large family. I've got four brothers myself. My dad had six brothers, and every male in my family, for as far back as I know that my grandpa was circumcised. I know that my dad was. I know that every male in my family, and I've got well over 100 males in my family, in my immediate bloodline. Every one of us has been circumcised. So none of us have ever encountered any problems. None of us have ever had any sexual dysfunction or anything like that. So to me, the whole topic is really just a matter of preference. I don't see, if people don't want to have it, then they shouldn't be forced to do it. And likewise, if people want to do it to their children, I believe that they have that parental right to do that. So tell me where I'm wrong here. Tell me what the world needs me to shut up about.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's lots of bits that we can attack here, but let's just talk a little bit first about the anatomy. So I use this tool here to explain things, and you notice that it's colored, and there's a reason why it's colored. And when you, and this one is intact, like this, right? And we were talking about how it's varied. It's been different kinds. I was showing you this book earlier, and another book that reference that goes through the entire Bible is called Circumcision, Ancient Blood Sacrifice. And it's understood that there's different versions from the Judaism perspective. They've got the Brit Milah, which used to cut off just the foreskin, okay, meaning the skin that is past the penis or past the gland, and they wouldn't expose the gland; they just cut off the part that would be hanging past. Now, how you determine how much is hanging past or not when you're dealing with a body part that expands and contracts, I don't know how they figure that out, but you can look at the tools that the the Moyles use, And one of the tools is called a barzell, and they slide it across the top, and then they slice, right, in order to try to get a straight line. And then in the Hellenistic period, this was an AD, like 180 AD or something like that, when Rome, was heavily influential, let's say, the men were playing sports in the nude, right? And it was believed by the Greeks that having an exposed glans was kind of, I don't know, it wasn't good in their opinion. So Jewish men that would play, they would do those uncircumcising thing where they would hang weights and stuff like that, and attach things to try to stretch their skin back over the glands again. And well, so they call it the rabbinical version. They also call it Brit Perea, where they decided to lay bare the glands. And you can look this stuff up in Jewish texts and all that. This is not hidden. This is not this is not misinformation being passed out there. There's another book written by a Jewish man about the topic. You can tell I've got a whole bookshelf of books on this topic. But the idea was to cut more off, to lay bare the glands. So I believe the way they started doing it back then was they would pull more of the skin up. Well, I actually met a Jewish man when I was a teenager who had a thumbnail that was shaped kind of like an arrowhead. And I asked him about it, and he wouldn't tell me about it. He was secretive about it. And I always kind of wondered about it. Now I know why. He was moil. They use that fingernail to go up inside between the glands and the inner mucosa of the prepuce to break the adhesions. It's called the prepubertal lamina. If you compare it to like fingernails, is one thing that's often compared to, where a fingernail bed is attached to your finger. Or think of cats. Kittens, when they're born, their eyes are born closed, and then they eventually separate and open up. The same thing happens with the penis and the clitoris. There is such a thing called clitoral phimosis. We'll get more into that later on. But so they go in there and break the membrane apart, and then they would pull more of the skin up through that barzell to cut more off. That way, when they're done, the glands is exposed, and there's not enough skin left over for the glands to get recovered. Now, this can lead to lots of problems because if they don't remove all of the inner mucosa, that's pretty much stuff from the red line up to underneath the glands, that tissue can re-adhere to the glands. And you end up with what's called skin bridges. And and that's why some people think that you need to forcefully retract and separate that, every diaper change, whatever, so it doesn't happen. You can look up, pictures. You can go out to Circumcision Harm.org, and you can find some pictures that are pretty gruesome.
Well, there's no doubt that any surgery, it doesn't matter if you're talking about removing a hangnail. There's people that die from that every day, right? I knew a guy one time, I was doing a job in Phoenix, Arizona, and a guy got poked by a piece of baling wire, and 3 days later he was dead, right, from sepsis. So I mean, especially things happen. I mean, dude, I had a hernia surgery in Iraq without anesthesia.
Of course,
I can tell you, huh?
Of course, but you wouldn't take unnecessary risks, right?
Well, that's the point. You're referring to these procedures that were done once upon a time.
So
I don't really care about how it was done 2,000 years ago, right? I mean,
but you need to understand the history to understand where we're at, right? So study the history a little bit, and then you understand where things came from and why it's being done the way it's being done now. So some people invented some various tools called they're bell methods. You've got the Gumco clamp and the Plastabell. Those are the two most commonly known tools, where instead of just breaking the lamina inside and then trying to pull skin up, they do a slit and then they put the bell over the glands, right, in order to help protect the glands. And then instead of pulling things up, they pull things up over the top of the belt and then slice here, which ends up cutting away not just the inner mucosa, but the outer layer that covers the glands as well. And you can end up with even less tissue, depending, of course, on how you do it. You could, one manual that I've read is they palpate the penis in order to make it erect. That way they get an idea of where the coronal ridge is. And then they make sure they don't cut lower than that, so they don't cut too much off. They try not to cut too much off. But too much is, you can argue all day about how much is too much, right? So yeah, that's
okay. So if this is such a dangerous thing, and if this messes people's lives up so badly, why do doctors continue to do it? Because doctors nowadays seem to be pretty liberal in their medical practices. And when I say liberal, I mean not homeopathic in any way possible. They basically rely on big pharma now to medicate people into recovery. So what is being done precisely now in modern times that is causing damage? What's the statistics of botched circumcisions? Do you know?
So
I don't know.
We don't know. And for some evidence, you can go out to the AAP and look up their 2012 technical report and their 2012 policy statement. And this event in 2012 is what largely started these guys up, as well as several other organizations that started speaking up about this issue, because what the AP said didn't make a lot of sense. One of the things that they said in that policy statement, which by the way is expired as of 2017, and they haven't renewed or created a new policy or anything since then. So that's quite a while ago now. Their policy statement said that the benefits outweigh the risks. But if you look at the technical report, they specifically say that the risks are unknown. Well, the risks are unknown for lots of reasons, right? They don't keep track of them. They don't keep records after like 7 years or whatever it is, particularly in the United States. Denmark is very different about that. Denmark requires that records be kept forever, right? Perpetuity. Yeah, that's a word. And we as men, they don't follow up with us and ask us how things are working down there for us when we're 12, 13, 14, 18, 20 years old, to see, hey, are things, really tight down there? Are you getting any kind of curvature because things were cut the wrong ways? Are you getting any kind of training? Are you getting any penoscrotal webbing? Have you had any meatal stenosis or meatitis? Any skin bridging? Any of that? They don't follow up with you. And I mean, I've tried to talk to my doctor. I've talked to lots of doctors, but even my own doctors about it, and they don't seem to be all that interested in it. They say, hey, if you're ejaculating and peeing, not my business. They don't care, and they're not going to write it down.
I mean, I'm not a urologist, so I don't know anything about any of that stuff. All I know is that if there was widespread issues, I'm pretty sure over a 5,000 year time period or longer, right? Yeah. I'm pretty sure that we would have plenty of documented evidence to back up the claim that it's a terrible thing to do.
So I was there with you, man. My oldest son is 19, and he's intact. And when he was born, I didn't know anything about this issue, and I was like wondering the same thing for the longest time. So why are they doing it if it's not necessary, if it's not valuable? You know, and these studies or whatever, you know, claiming various benefits are dubious. So, you know,
Well, to your opinion, they're dubious. You know,
yeah,
here's
well,
the thing.
and not just me.
Sure.
I also refer to doctors. There's lots of books here, and there has been a lot of documentation. Again, I've got 2.5 bookshelves here of things
I mean,
about
you
this.
do realize, listen, man, you do realize that there's people that when it comes to science, there's always people on both sides of the argument, right? We could talk about
I,
COVID or
I,
we could talk about
I know.
global warming. There's plenty of people on one side that say the research shows this, and then there's always going to be plenty of people on the other side that show something else. Again, my two oldest daughters are both doctors, and both of them had pretty extensive schooling, and neither
Great.
one of them has ever had a problem with circumcision.
And I'd be
So,
happy to talk to them about it.
well, they
Here's a book
wouldn't.
from the urologist right here.
I'm simply saying, who's paying for these studies? What is the political motivation behind them?
Good questions.
Right? Because again, like I said yesterday,
Yep.
thousands and thousands of years have gone by without any mass complaining, and now all of a sudden, in the last 20 or 30 years, men are getting all up. They're getting all up in arms over this, and I'm simply asking if it was that big of a problem to begin with, especially with their archaic methods of doing it back in those days. Why hasn't there been more widespread evidence of damage or of any of that stuff?
Because again, they're not recording it, they're not capturing it, they don't want to expose it. This book right here was 1980, so it's been more than 20 years. But the reason why you hear more about it in the last 20 years is because of social media. But yeah, I was there, man. I questioned this left and right for a long time because I had to make sure that my wife and I made the right decisions for our sons. And it's like, it just didn't make sense to me. It was really hard to consider the possibility that the people that are supposed to love me the most, the people that, you know, lead religious groups, the people that are supposed to be taking care of people and following the oath to not do harm, are not fighting against us more. And the more that I've studied, the more I realize it's largely about money and protecting religious interests and stuff like that. So, and when you ask about money, you know, about these studies that are being done, when it comes to the side, the intactivist side, the advocates for genital autonomy side, that, you know, create books like this and have, you know, annual or biannual meetings and all that, they're all volunteers. They're doing it. They're either,
Yeah,
well, they're
and none of those
talking
people,
to,
none of those people have any room to speak if they have not been circumcised. None of those
so
people have any room to speak if they have not been circumcised.
I
Very
agree.
similar to
I
me.
know. Yeah.
I,
Yep.
I, I mean, I'll just throw out an example. I do not have the knowledge or the right to talk about uncircumcision because I don't know it. I've never had it throughout my entire life.
So
So I don't know.
you're making the case for leaving boys intact, even from intact, I mean, from cut dads. You just made the case for
No, I didn't.
you to have, yeah, you just did. Because you yourself don't know what it's like to have foreskin. So you took it from your
Yes,
son.
but I do know what it's like not to have it, and I have thoroughly enjoyed
You
it.
believe, okay.
That's the
Yeah,
point.
I thoroughly enjoy sex too, man. But I learned that I've had several issues and that they're connected to having been cut. One of the first issues that I had was when I was around 7 years old, and I ended up with a little bridge across my meatus, and it made my pee go all over the place. It was a really quick and simple, you know, fix. The doctor, he took a knife and just cut it out, and the problem went away. But I've also had a certain degree of myelostenosis, which creates a sharp pain at the end of my ureter. I grew up with it, so I thought that was normal. I have penoscrotal webbing, meaning that my scrotum is drawn up onto my shaft when I have an erection. And I
What
also
does that have
have,
to do with circumcision? What does that have to do with circumcision?
okay, take a look at this for a second. Imagine this being a circumcised one, okay? And it's flaccid right now, right? You only have so much skin, right? So when it becomes erect and it starts growing, it's pulling on the skin. If you don't have skin here to unroll down onto the shaft, where's the skin coming from?
Well, skin stretches. I think they literally made a joke about this in the Bible when they said Moses tied his ass to a tree and walked 50 miles, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Skin stretches, and listen, man, I'm not trying to downplay your personal injuries. I'm simply saying this, and again, I'm not a urologist, so I don't know the intricacies of any of it.
So a lot of men didn't get cut tight. A lot of men have loose cuts. Maybe you are lucky enough to have a loose cut. One of the ways that you can tell is by looking up, you can Google this, or you probably better look up DuckDuckGo or something like that. Coverage index, where they give numbers from 1 to 10, or 0 to 10 actually, of how much skin is covering your glands when you are not erect. And what I found from a lot of men, especially men that don't complain, is that they have some coverage when they're not erect. They have skin mobility when they are erect. Their scrotum isn't drawing up. They aren't having, tight skin one way or another, pulling their, shaft one way or another, or getting craning, or their penis is pulling all the way up against their stomach when they have an erection. So yeah, skin does stretch, but only stretches so far. And I was cut, obviously, very, very tight. And some men will say, well, then you're botched. Okay, so how many men are botched? We don't know because we don't survey them. Not very many. And there are some surveys. One is done by Tim Hammond, a guy that I work with, who we started this organization right here. And some men speak up, and men have spoke up and caused this book to be created. There's some Reddit. There's two Reddit groups, forums. One is for foreskin restoration, and another is for circumcision. I think it's called grief. Yeah, circumcision grief, where men talk about how they feel harmed by the procedure. So when it comes right down to it, we all have to be able to draw our own dotted lines.
Yeah. Well, this is where I say that, and this really goes along with any type of injury or pain. And here again, I'm no stranger to it, but a lot of it is psychological, and this kind of gets me into the whole crutch of your issues and possibly other men's issues. Is so you're blaming your parents for making a decision.
No, I'm not blaming my parents. My parents are one to blame, but there's several to blame. I mean, again, just like you were saying, this is historical. It goes way back thousands of years, and it became a norm. And it became more of a norm in Anglosphere, in the U.S. I mean, our forefathers that founded this country they were intact. But guys like Dr. Kellogg, and so many other doctors in the 1800s that thought that touching yourself or having sex or masturbating or whatever was causing all sorts of ills. And you can watch the documentary called American Circumcision, and it goes into some of those. There's other documentaries out there that talk about it. You can actually look up Dr. Kellogg's book and read it from the 1800s.
I mean, if I cared enough about it, I probably would. But here's the thing. Yeah. I keep kind of going back to this. There has been cultural, ritualistic traditions, that are far more extreme than this. I mean, there's certain tribes in Africa that burn their, they do the branding marks on their kids.
Yeah.
Right. And so my simple point with this is, if it was that bad of a thing, then it would not be common practice, especially in today's world with social media and with the resources available to spread information. If it was really truly that bad of a thing, and if it was that dangerous, doctors wouldn't be doing it.
Did you follow the female genital mutilation movement? that has
I
been
did.
that led to the 1996 federal law.
Yeah.
So
I know all about that.
at one
And
time,
again, I've actually spent years of my life in places like the Middle East where I've been around that kind of stuff firsthand. So I do understand it.
thank
I'm
you for your
not an
service.
advocate for female
Right.
circumcision,
Okay.
but
But
nonetheless,
the point is it was accepted even here in the United States up until then to do that kind of thing to girls. So
yeah,
what
witch
did it
burning
take?
was also a
What
pretty big thing at one point in
what did it
history.
take to change it? What did it take?
It
A
took
lot of
women,
activism.
it took feminists jumping up and saying no more. So that's my point. If
Exactly.
they can do it, why
Exactly.
can't men?
Exactly. So here I am, along with a whole bunch of other men, saying, "This is bull. Stop doing this to us."
Okay. So let's get back to the whole psychological aspect of this. So you don't blame your parents. You say you don't blame your parents, but yesterday you made a comment that you did address it with them and they apologized. So what were they apologizing for?
Well, they said that they did it just because it was the norm. Everyone else was doing it. And I was born in the U.S. Navy hospital. So was my two younger brothers, and it was so routine back then that I don't think they even they didn't get a signature from my parents or anything for it. It's just they just did it like cutting the umbilical cord. And that's changed in the 1980s. It became clear that they needed to start asking for permission for that kind of thing. But yeah, they just did it because they thought that was the norm, and that they thought, oh, I feel like you and like I used to, that it's not harmful, and supposedly it reduces chances of syphilis or whatever STDs, and um, yeah, and this was shortly after World War II, like you brought up, where some intact men would get infections because they were sitting in filth for a very long time without getting showers. So that's a justification for creating warriors right when they're born.
Right. So what's wrong with creating warriors? Just out of curiosity, what's wrong with creating a brand for
Are you a
your
Star Trek
tribe?
fan? Are you a Trekkie?
What's that?
Are you a
A
Trekkie?
what?
Star Trek?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. So one of the parts from Star Trek was the Borg. And one of the things that they would say is resistance is futile, where they would make humanoids into part man, part machine, and they would connect them to the collective, via brain. So you heard what everyone was talking about and saying and doing all that. Do you think something like that would be okay?
I think we see that kind of stuff every single day, especially with the way that meta and social media is becoming. I mean that's just how humans behave.
Well,
Humans form fraternities. They always have. There's power in numbers, right? We could look at polygyny. We could look at any number of aspects where humans build their numbers with like-minded people.
so
Okay,
you're okay with
specifically.
having a chip forced into your brain or having vaccines forced on you?
Well, I don't believe in vaccines. I have not gotten my kids vaccines, but why do I have a funny feeling that
So,
you're a pro-choice guy? Why do I have a funny
okay.
feeling like you
All right, all
probably
right,
wouldn't have a
all right,
problem with an
fine.
abortion?
So everyone likes to bring up this one, and it's a red herring argument. But let's go and explore it for a second.
It's not a
So
red herring argument. You're talking about
it
body
is, and
mutilation,
here's why. Here's why. Because you're talking about the rights of two people, not one,
right?
right? So you're talking about
Technically, you're talking about the rights of three people because, contrary to popular belief, there's also a father that has a
yeah, okay,
biological role in that
fine,
process.
yeah. But circumcision, if you want to call it that, is
Is a
dealing with
cut,
one person. It's one person,
right?
one person, right? So it's
It's
a red
dealing
herring
with
because
a non-fatal,
it's a false
right?
equivalent, right? It's a false equivalence. But let's go ahead and address it for a second. So if you're pro-life, you believe that the person has human rights, correct? Correct?
Certain human rights,
Okay.
sure.
So does the person have human rights after they're out of the womb?
Certain human rights until they're at the age of discretion, sure.
Okay. So you can argue, just like female circumcision or scarification or neck elongation or anything else, that cutting off part of male genitalia is a violation of that human rights. So let's go to the other side.
Except that it doesn't kill that male, whereas an abortion actually kills that other person.
I get it. So let's go on to the other side, the pro-choice side. So the pro-choice side.
Are you pro-choice or are you pro-life?
So I am pro-life, but I do not agree with making it criminalized. So if you're pro-choice, you believe that the woman has rights over their own body, right?
I guess that's what they believe. I don't really know.
So why
I'm
don't
not a
males
pro-choice guy, so I don't know.
Okay, but that's the stance of the pro-choice side, is that the women have choice. They have body rights. They have body autonomy rights. No one should be forced to host another person inside their body, just like you should not be forced to house someone in your own home. Right?
Yeah, there's a big difference there. You're talking, yeah, sure, if it's rape or incest or something like that, sure. But for a normal woman who chooses to open up her legs and allow a man to impregnate her, that is not even a viable.
I'm very familiar with the argument. Yeah, I'm not ignorant to the arguments on both sides, but that's where that's when it comes to genital autonomy, which this image right here is the International Child for Genital Autonomy. Comes in. We're talking about the rights of one person. One person.
Okay. So you believe that a newborn baby has every rights that a full-grown man should have, right? That they can make their own decisions and that parents shouldn't do anything
unless it's medically necessary.
Okay, so you don't believe in vaccines either then?
That's a tough one. Because
no, it's really not. You're putting something into your body that changes your entire molecular structure.
There's a difference there too. So do vaccines harm?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And there is plenty of scientific evidence to back that up.
Then don't vaccinate your kids.
But
some people think that that it doesn't. So I'm kind of. I'll tell you, I used to work for a pharmaceutical company for 5 years, and I'm dubious when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry, particularly in the United States. I'm dubious of anything that is driven by money. I used to be a fan of capitalism, but and I still kind of am. I like the idea that money can get people to do the right thing, good things, better things, whatever, to provide better quality services or faster services at a better price, stuff like that. But sometimes that gets twisted and leads to bad things as well. So I don't really care to argue one way or another because I'm not really knowledgeable on vaccines. I know how pharmaceutical companies behave because I work for one. But that's not to say that vaccines are good or bad. And some might be good and some might be bad. It might be the way that it's delivered might be bad. I don't know. There's a lot of nuance to that issue. And it's a separate issue.
Do you agree that vaccines are specifically designed, especially mRNA vaccines? Do you agree that they are designed to change your DNA?
I'm not knowledgeable on that topic. So I'm going to stay out of that. I don't know.
When a woman gets injected with male sperm, does that change her DNA?
From what I've heard, yes, but I don't know for sure. I don't know.
Of course it does.
I don't have 2.5 shelves of books on vaccines and chemistry.
No,
and all
you got 2.5 shelves of books on circumcision.
Listen, on genital cutting ritual.
Okay, listen, man, I'm trying to give you a chance to answer these questions. I'm not trying to shame you. I'm trying to learn here, and you're not proving your point. I want to know if it is so bad, and if there's so much widespread discomfort or sexual dysfunction, why is it still happening? And why have people like me never experienced any of those problems?
So look at countries like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the UK.
All very liberal countries, right?
Okay, fine, whatever. They have universal health care, and they all
Call it
stopped
that.
paying. They all stopped paying for the procedure. Why? You say you're telling me that it's still happening, so it must not be that
Because
bad.
it's an elective surgery. It's not necessary.
So
It's something.
So why is some of the states and some of the insurance companies in the United States still paying for it?
Because it's a cultural thing that people want to have access to.
So if it's
People in
cultural,
America
that's
don't
not
want to
healthcare.
stop.
If it's cultural, it's not healthcare.
Oh, yes, it is. Come on. Everything we do in healthcare, remember, we're going back to this whole capitalist talk, right? Everything in our entire healthcare system revolves around generating profit.
Okay,
So, of
so
course, it's going to have a.
if my culture wants my daughter cut, why shouldn't that be covered then? Let's be fair and honest. You
Live in a
you
culture
are a
that
veteran.
supports that, then you should.
You are a veteran, right? So you fought for
am.
this country. What do you think of the 14th Amendment?
I hate it. I don't like it at all.
Okay, but you fought for it.
I fought for a lot of things.
Okay.
I also fought for you to have the freedom to sit here and run your mouth too. But,
Yep.
And I respect that freedom. I will
Cool.
defend your right to say whatever you want to say with my life. The problem I have with this whole theology here, because that's what it is, really, it's a cultural theology. One side agrees with it, the other side does not. It doesn't matter why it happens. It doesn't matter if it's just a ritual. It doesn't matter if it's just a cultural thing. The question comes down, does it cause more harm than it actually helps? It's the simplest question. And if it does, why isn't there more proof of this? Because I'll tell you, I think most men, if they had dick issues, they're going to complain about it.
Yep.
Right. It's kind of like when a guy has ED issues, right? It's a very emotionally, it's crushing for men that have those types of urological issues.
Did you
And
know
so
you
they
brought
go
up
to
ED? Did you know that ED is more common among cut men than intact men by like 4 times?
well,
You can
I'd
look up
like
the
to see
study.
that stat. I don't believe that, and I'd like to see the company
I mean, think
that
about it.
studied that survey. But
Think about it.
here's what I'm saying. I saw a post yesterday on Twitter. I can't remember whose it was, but somebody said that circumcision is a gateway to drug abuse and suicide and all these other things. And that's absolutely false. There's been no scientific evidence to back that up. Anybody can
Read this
write a
book.
book. I've written 3.
No.
Listen, man, anybody can write a
You,
book. I've written
you talk
3.
about scientific evidence. You talk about scientific evidence. This book right here, about a third of it, I'm getting almost there. About a third of it is nothing but about that much of the book is nothing but links to sources that aren't even his. They're not his.
Okay.
He gets this information from looking at all these different studies. And here's another one. This guy looked more at it from a sociological perspective, right? And these are doctors and PhDs, okay? So, yeah, I mean, your question is valid. You know, it's a very good one.
Again,
And again,
I've got 2 daughters. I've got 2 daughters that are both doctors. One is a PhD, one is a medical. I don't care. Anybody can write a book. Again, there's plenty of people that write books out there that are not 100% factual. Look at the Bible, right? The longest running book in the history of the world that's probably not very factual.
So show me a book that promotes doing it. Or multiple books that promotes doing it and why. And
again,
that book I just showed you, go ahead and read it. It's great.
Yeah, I'm not going to read any of this. Again, I don't care enough about to really even.
So
don't care.
You don't care, but I cared enough to care about my sons because I have 3 reasons for doing this. One is my sons are intact, and I want them to be able to live in a society that doesn't body shame them for being intact.
Okay, and that's perfectly fine because that is your parental prerogative. Okay, the problem here is that you're trying to take away my right to do what I want to do with my son.
Okay.
Okay. No, you made the threat yesterday. Listen, you
who-
made the threat yesterday that you call CPS on
Yep.
fathers who get their sons cut.
So who decided that it's a parent's right? When was this legislated?
Decided that it's not.
Look at the U.S. Constitution. Look at the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Who decided that it's not a parental right?
again,
Where does it say that in the Constitution?
Look at the Bill of Rights.
Where does it say it in the Bill of Rights? Give me an example. Where does it say that parents don't have the right to get their kids circumcised?
Are children citizens?
Absolutely.
Okay, so they should be protected just like adults.
Yeah. Do adults not get circumcised?
They choose to.
Yeah, they choose to. I've got a friend who did it when he was 18.
Yeah, I know many that have done it as adults. But that doesn't mean that it's right, and the parent has a right to do it to a child without a medical need.
Okay, so again, are you going to call CPS on parents who choose to get their children vaccinated?
Well, I don't know whether vaccines are harmful or not.
Oh, so just because you haven't read those books means that you don't support body anonymity on that level. I got you. I got you.
Yeah, well, some
you
people will call
understand the
CPS for
hypocrisy?
spanking.
You're a hypocrite, man. You're talking about stuff that is completely hypocritical.
I'm not a hypocrite. I know what I know.
Talking about something that causes. How many people have died from circumcision?
Well, there's studies have been found well over 100 per year just in the United States alone.
Oh wow, 100 per year, and they can directly trace that to circumcision, right?
Yeah,
100 per year.
Well, there's a lot of people that think that it's a lot more because doctors don't have to put it down that it has anything to do with the circumcision, right? Because they could die from hearts bursting, lungs collapsing, blood loss. One of them, and herpes is another.
Okay. So let's stay with that stat: 100 people per year. Now, how many people have died from vaccines?
I don't know, and again, that's not something I've studied.
Yeah, so you don't see all the people out there all over Facebook that are complaining about heart problems and all kinds of other shit. I can tell you, my own father died the day after he got vaccinated. Right?
Yeah,
the hospital chalked it up to a heart attack. Listen,
I totally
trying to give you a chance to prove yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're not proving your point here.
All you're
proving is that a sock looks better when the skin is pulled up. Look, man.
But whose choice should it be?
If you want, how do you know that our founders were uncut? How do you know that?
I'm not interested in arguing that.
How do you know that our founders were uncut? How do you know that?
You want proof that it's harmful? It's pretty obviously harmful because you're cutting off.
I want you to answer my question. How do you know that the founders were uncut?
How do you know that they're not? Or how do you know that they weren't?
Well, I can tell you how I know that a lot of them were actually cut, because a lot of them were Freemasons. Okay, as I am as well. I am also a Freemason. Freemasonry revolves around Egyptian Gnosticism and a whole lot of Jewish tradition, right?
Okay.
We literally call it the Cabal.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
I can promise you that a good majority of our founders were absolutely cut, because that was a highly traditional thing back then.
Yeah.
Especially for warriors, people like George Washington, who grew up with good, strong Christian Judeo backgrounds.
Yeah. So prove that it's not harmful to cut off highly vascularized and innervated tissue.
Okay. So once again, I would really love to see the statistics on botched circumcisions.
I would too, but no one's taking them. No one's collecting the data.
Okay, well, maybe you can make this your life's mission to collect that data and actually give some factual evidence as to the damage that it does cause. Because so far, all you've given me is hearsay on some people that think this and some people that think that. Yeah, hearsay. Anybody can write a book. Anybody can find scientific
No
evidence
one,
to back up their theory.
these are stories from individual men.
Yeah, and I'm not denying that there's not some men that had some botched surgeries. I'm sure there's plenty of them. But 100 deaths a year out of 350 million people is not a very high statistic. There's more people that die from that from frapping themselves to death on the toilet. I mean, I'm just trying to understand your logic here. If you don't want to do it to your kids, that's fine. You should have that parental authority to make that decision.
It shouldn't be a decision at all.
Why are you trying to literally get people imprisoned for their choice to get their kids circumcised?
Because I consider it physical harm and abuse.
But the majority of the population does not. So you are going against
that depends on what population you're talking about. You talk about the United States.
I think any population doesn't really care.
Nope. Because no, Denmark, over 80% were ready to ban the procedure. In Iceland,
how many times have you been to Denmark?
I haven't been, but I've spoken with people from there.
Okay.
I
lived about 4 hours away from Denmark for 7 years of my life. I've been there many, many times. I never had any discussions with men about their dicks. Why do you have discussions with men from Denmark about their dicks?
I don't have discussions about dicks. I have discussions about human rights.
Ah, human rights. So a cut is more serious than getting injected with a vaccine, right?
I didn't say that.
You are saying that. That's exactly what you're saying.
Do you I don't know about vaccines. You are bringing up a red herring by bringing up vaccines. Let's stick to the topic.
Do you call CPS on parents that get their kids vaccinated?
No, because I don't know whether it's harmful or not.
Oh, okay. So here again, you've focused on one key element in your whole life. This is your passion, right?
I have my reasons.
I'm sure you do. Apparently, the trauma is real. Apparently, people can actually be traumatized from a scar on the end of their dick.
So let me ask you a question. Why do you care if people get other people to stop doing it?
I don't care. Be an activist all you want.
Then why fight it?
The minute that you start getting law enforcement involved because your sensitivities, that's where it starts to get dangerous. And I'm telling you,
then you could go to court
and fire by making those kind of threats. I'm telling you.
Then you go to court and defend those people. Meanwhile, I'm part of a group that is going to try to end it, even if we have to do it in courts.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that when you're dealing with cultural norms, things that especially are religiously ingrained, societies tend to hold on to those traditions pretty tightly.
I totally get it. I understand. Again,
especially when it's been going on for over 5,000 years.
On the sociological perspectives.
Okay. Sociological perspectives. Oh man, you're interesting. I'll give you that. I'll truly give you that. You're interesting. Is your 19-year-old son sexually active? Do you know? I'm not trying to pry into his personal business, but is he sexually active?
I don't know. Don't care. It's his life.
I would like to talk to somebody. I would like to talk to an adult male who was not cut up until, in other words, I want to talk to somebody who had sex both before and after circumcision.
So there's a guy that shows up on the documentary American Circumcision, and he talks about it. He talks about it really loudly. He shows up on social media a lot, but he sometimes gets censored because he's very angry because he got cut at 18, and then he later on did some restoration, and he talks about how the difference was night and day. It's a huge loss. Now, getting cut as an adult is a little different than being cut as a baby, because when you're cut as an adult and then as a baby and things develop, if you look at how genitalia develops, things end up different than if you get cut as an adult. If you get cut as an adult, most likely your glands are still smooth. If you get cut as a baby, then it gets rough, keratinized. It's kind of like scar tissue, because it's mucosal tissue, right? Just like the inside of your mouth, inside of your nose. inside of the vagina. It's not
Yeah.
meant to be exposed all the time.
Okay. Well, sure. I understand the workings of how the penises work. I grew up on a farm, so I've seen plenty of animals and other things that natural human form is obviously something that I guess the way I look at it, it's just not that big of a deal. It's not life threatening. It's
Yeah.
not. I do believe that it keeps men cleaner. I do believe that it keeps men disease freer. Doesn't mean that it's going to protect men from everything, but this is my personal belief. There
Okay,
has
so let's
been
talk
no
about
medical doctor that
let's talk about cleanliness for a second. You remember how I told you how the inner mucosa is adhered when they're babies, right? So
yeah.
I wiped my son's butts, and I wiped butts of baby boys that were cut. And let me tell you, baby boys that are intact are actually easier because all you do is wipe from base to
I
tip.
don't care.
There,
I don't care.
there's no Vaseline that you need to put on the end of the penis or any of that stuff
Okay.
to make sure they don't
Well,
adhere to the diaper.
I guess I never
Yeah.
paid enough attention to really make it matter in my life, because to me it didn't matter one way or another. The goal was to just get my kid clean.
And when they
So
get older, all they do is they pull it back, and you just make sure that they do. It's really not complicated. It's not hard. You know, getting them to brush their teeth was 1,000 times more difficult than getting them to take
there's
care
no
of
doubt.
that part in there. So talking about it being cleaner is just BS that the fox who lost his tail spreads around in order to justify what was done to him.
Okay, then let me put this a different way. I actually, aside from the medical inconsistencies that everyone keeps talking about it, one of the reasons that I agree with it is because I do believe in branding. I do believe in showing warriors and having fraternal. Here again, I'm a Freemason. So I'm all about fraternity. I'm all about tradition. I'm all about
Good luck with that.
ritualistic ideology.
Good luck with that. You're helping my cause. Thank you.
No, I'm not. What I'm telling you is that there's a good majority of people who think the same way as me. You're going against the majority.
I'm
That's
not so
fine.
positive about that, because from what I understand, the numbers in the U.S. have gone down drastically. The numbers in other countries like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Europe have gone down drastically because they've learned that it's harmful.
It's not
So,
a learned thing. It's a political movement. It has nothing to do with learning that there's harm in any of it. It's no different than global warming. It is no different than the COVID hoax. It is people that are following other people through sheep mentality, herd mentality. That's what it's called. You want to talk about sociology? That's very interesting. But
that can be said for both sides.
the what?
That could be said for both sides. The sheep
Of
mentality,
course it
herd
can.
mentality. Yeah.
Of course it can. The difference is that when you have a minority that's going against the majority, cultural norms are set by the majority. If
And
people
guess
don't
what?
like that cultural, if people
Things
don't like that
have
cultural norm,
changed.
they have two options. Well, they have three options.
Slavery was a cultural norm. It
It
changed.
absolutely was.
Who changed it? People that were brave enough to stand up.
Yeah, a majority of people who were brave enough to stand up.
Oh,
A
started
majority.
off with minorities. These movements always start off with small groups of people. They grow.
All right, you're right about that. They always start off with small groups of people that grow, and if they can grow into an army, then they can conquer the world. I agree with that. I'm all about command and conquer. I'm all about conquer and destroy. Believe me, I'm all about that. Unlike you, I've actually been to war. Trust me, I understand the concept. The thing is here again, there are some things that are changeable, and there are some things that aren't. I'll give you a great example.
If you
Cutting
don't
our
think it's
hair.
changeable, fine.
Huh?
Okay. If you don't think that it's changeable, fine. But I think that it's changing. I've been watching it change.
Oh, I think it's changeable. I just don't agree with the reason behind it. I think it's changeable. I just don't agree with the reason behind it. So there's no doubt. I mean, here again, we let's talk about haircuts. Do you know what tradition started men cutting their hair short? Okay, it was all in protest in France of people getting killed by the guillotine, right? French men started cutting their hair short in protest, and it caught on, and now all of a sudden the whole world thinks that men should have short hair, right? A couple hundred years later, that's all it took for a societal norm, a societal trend, a tradition, if you will. That's all it took to establish that tradition. So I'm not saying that your movement is without merit. I'm not saying that you can't accomplish what you're trying to do.
You can use the same thing for how circumcision became popular in the first place.
Well, once again, circumcision became popular by a guy who just happened to be the bravest person probably ever recorded in history. Okay, kings get to make their own rules. I don't know why this is so complicated to understand. Kings get to make their own rules. They set the standards. They set the trends. Okay, it's no different from the oligarchs that run our country. Look at Elon Musk. Look at Twitter. Look at your little blue check mark that every single person on Twitter has now. Huh?
I totally agree with you on that one.
Okay, well, the point is, you're talking about sociology. Do you have a background in sociology?
Nope.
No?
I just read this book.
Okay, so you don't have an educational background in sociology. I happen to have a bachelor's degree in sociology, right? That's what I needed in the Army to become an Army officer. So it was the easiest degree I could possibly find. My wife has a master's in psychology, and I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you from a sociological aspect, and I don't agree with you from a medical aspect.
So read the book and then
I'm not going to read the book, man. Why do you keep pulling the book up?
Because you're saying
I'm asking you to prove. I'm asking you to prove your point. And you have not done that.
Everything about this. I'm going to refer you to other things that you can learn from yourself. I don't have time to sit here and tell you everything that I've read in all these different books. Okay. So you said that you study sociology. That means that you have an interest in sociology. Why don't you pick apart that book and say how it's wrong?
Because I don't care. Because it's all a bunch of liberal beta men who are whining about a little scar on their dick. That's what this comes down to.
A little scar. It's only 15 square inches that's missing from the adult man. You take that 5 inches or 3 inches, and then 5 inches across, around, or whatever.
Yeah.
15 square inches missing from the
it's no different than piercing a kid's ear.
It's no different. A study that leads to these colors right here is highly erogenous tissue that is missing from your body. You can argue it all you want, but the studies prove. Okay, you ask for proof. You ask for saying for showing why it's wrong, why it's harmful. There it is. Go look up the Sorrell study and see it for yourself.
I don't believe the study. It's that simple. You know, there's also studies out there. You know, the University of Seattle really released a study in 2022 that
I can show you 1,000 books,
women,
and you're not going to believe anything. Is that what you're saying?
Look,
I can show you all sorts of evidence.
Okay, so let's get back to the crutch. Let's get back to the crutch. Listen, I got to wrap this up because I've got better shit to do today. But let's get back to the crutch of the issue here, which is men who are complaining about this. They're not complaining so much about the physical aspect, the physical side effects, as much as they are complaining about the psychological aspects, because somebody told them that they should be all butthurt because they're missing a little piece of their pee-pee.
I highly disagree. Every man I've spoken to, every man that I've spoken to that got cut and is mad that they're cut, I could talk to them. I usually use this tool, and they could tell me what's missing or what's not missing and why they're upset about it.
How do they know?
All they have to do is look.
They got cut.
It's visible.
After being sexually active, how do they know?
You look. It's just like someone that got a hand cut off, or was born with only one hand. They can look at people with two hands and say, yeah, I wish I had two hands.
But they don't need to whine about it their whole lives.
Skin mobility. I wish I had glands coverage. I wish I had that stuff. You might not. But you know what?
Hey.
It comes down to human rights. Each person should be able to choose for themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And that includes vaccines. That includes everything else that has to do with anything that you can do to a kid. So either push the law 100% or shut the fuck up and go home. How about that?
Okay, then let's get rid of the FGM law.
Do it across the board. Dude,
let's get rid of the FGM law then.
Do it across the board. or shut the fuck up and go
14th
home.
Amendment. Go ahead and get rid of FGM law then.
What?
Get rid of the anti-FGM law. You say go do it
Oh
across
my
the board and get rid of
goodness.
it all together. You're fighting for the 14th Amendment right now.
I don't give a fuck about the 14th Amendment.
You just
That has
now
nothing to
said it.
do with any of this.
You just said it. Do it across the board or don't do it at all. So
Yeah.
either protect everyone from genital mutilation or don't do it at all.
Yeah, that includes vaccines.
Okay.
That includes piercing your 1-year-old daughter's ear.
Go for it. Contact your legislature.
That includes cutting their hair. Are you smart enough to understand? That literally means stop cutting your children's hair until they reach an age of consent. Isn't that is that different? Because that doesn't hurt.
Hair is bodily waste. It's dead.
Oh, is it? Is it really?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
What about the cultures that believe that hair is your strength? You know, there's plenty of cultures like that. Look at the Amish, right? The Amish don't cut their hair. Did you know that?
Again, false equivalencies.
No, I'm not. I'm giving you real life things
It's false
that
equivalence.
want to protect people. Do it across the board.
False equivalence. Red herrings.
You're picking and choosing little fucking beta male shit.
And you're bringing up false equivalencies and red herrings.
Huh?
And you're bringing up false equivalencies and red herrings.
There's no false equivalency.
Should we be cutting off part of people's dicks? Yes or no? It's a simple question.
If it doesn't cause mass amounts of harm,
you know
and
what?
if there are benefits to it, which some people believe there are.
Yeah. And cutting off the clitoral hood, same thing.
If that's part of their culture, that's their business.
Okay. That's your side, and I've shared with you mine. I'm done. I don't have anything else to share with you unless you're actually interested in learning more about,
Well, no, I've given you an hour to prove yourself, and you've literally just talked around the entire thing. Like this is supposed to convince me that you're right and I'm wrong. Here's the thing. I don't give a fuck one way or another who does what.
Let's see what your listeners think.
Okay, let's see what my listeners think. Like I give a shit about that either. I don't I'm not here because I give a shit about my listeners.
Go you.
Yeah, go you. Ahead. Where's your fucking podcast, dude? Listen, I'm going to let you go.
Look me up on YouTube. I've got tons of videos. And TikTok.
Okay, good for you. So, man, I'm telling you,
I'll watch your podcast.
You are the reason. You are the kind of man that is the reason why we have not won a war since World War II. I'm telling you straight up.
If you think so.
Oh, I do think so. I don't think that you'd be brave enough to fight if it fucking paid you $1 million a second.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting here talking to assholes like you.
Yeah, well, and you're more than comfortable doing that, hiding behind your computer screen.
I go out in public wearing these outfits.
If you ever threaten somebody to call CPS on them again, if you ever threaten to call CPS on somebody again because they got their kids circumcised.
Why are you so afraid?
Oh, I'm not afraid of nothing.
You think it's a good thing, and you don't think that people are going to get prosecuted for doing it, then why do you care if I call CPS?
Because it's none of your business, for starters. For second of all, if you're going to fuck with my family, trust me, I will find you.
So you're not going to say anything if some girl is going to get her hood cut off. Is that right? Are you not going to call CPS?
No. If that's part of their culture, no.
I signed a thing saying that I'm a mandatory reporter. Mandatory reporter of child abuse. If I know that child abuse is happening, guess what? I have to report it. I am mandated to do so.
And when it becomes law that it's child abuse,
therefore,
and when it becomes law,
mandated to report it.
When it becomes law that it is child abuse, then you will have that legal obligation. But until then, you're being a buddy fucker. You're being a little blue falcon bitch. Hey, dude, listen.
Get me proof.
Either enforce the law or get the law changed to enforce it. Don't sit here and pretend like you have the authority to enforce laws that don't even exist.
Sexual battery of a minor. That
is. Oh my goodness! Shut the fuck up, you fucking faggot, man! How did you make it this far through life? How did you make it this far through life?
It's battery. Prove that it's not. Go for it.
You are a special kind of
Go for it.
pussy. Listen, you have
Go
not
for it.
proven a single thing to me. I'm going to go ahead and let you go here.
See you later,
I'll
sir.
post this shit, man. I wish you luck
All right.
in your endeavors.
All right. You
Man,
too.
you're
Take
special,
care.
dude. You take care.
Have a good day.
All right, folks. So there you have it, man. There was that was the culmination of this discussion. I really, man, I have a hard time respecting men like this. Here again, to me, this is a masculinity issue, not a medical issue, not a social issue. Well, it's social because it's lack of masculine men that are causing this. To me, this is a pandemic, right? To me, this is a pandemic. If a man has a serious medical problem caused by a botched circumcision, that is absolutely terrible. But if you are a man who simply complains about it because you think that it would have been better if you would have had foreskin, shut up. I'm sorry that your little pee-pee got cut. Life goes on. I've literally known men who have had their legs ripped off by Taliban snipers who didn't have this level of PTSD. And that's really what it comes down to. Call it the warrior's helmet, call it the clean dick, I don't care. Circumcision has been an integral part of human culture for 5,000 years, probably closer to about 7,000 years. If it was really that bad, and if it didn't have a benefit, people would have stopped doing it a long time ago. It's that simple. But nonetheless, I gave this gentleman a chance to come on here and prove me wrong, and he was not able to do that. Ultimately, I'm happy that he had the freedom to make the choice he made for his children. I don't want to force anybody to be circumcised if they don't think that it's a necessary thing. But on that same note, the minute that he starts threatening people to call CPS, like that's even going to do anything, it's not against the law, genius. But the fact that he wants to take it to that level, he's playing a dangerous game, folks. And I'll tell you what, you need to watch out for little beta faggots like this. And I'm going to say that straight up. If that offends you, I'm very sorry. Not really. This problem is an emasculated male problem. It has nothing to do with medical conditions or anything like that. So when somebody can come and prove to me that circumcision is bad, I am going to continue supporting it. That's all there is to it. Y'all take care. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.